everybody, thank you for tuning into my YouTube channel. This is Eve West. This channel is dedicated to a book I wrote. It's called Follow. My book looks at spirituality from a more holistic view, from a spiritual as well as an earthly aspect of a human being. Typically in society, the matrix, whatever you want to call it, the demiurge or demiurge, we look at spirituality more from the metaphysics, from love and caring and sharing and creativity and that type of thing. But there's also another aspect to us which is earthly, which is governed by our reptilian brain, governed by our five senses. And so I really focus on how the creator of this world actually separated the mind, the left and the right brain, and disintegrates a human being so they can experience themselves in a very disintegrated way before awakening. When we awaken, we come back to who we are, but once we're disintegrated, we interact with each other in a very judgmental type of way, instead of seeing others as ourselves, or seeing things, or whatever it is, the physical universe, seeing it as ourselves. And so my book is overall about that. If you look in the comment section, you can actually purchase your book on Amazon. I have a link that you can purchase the book on Amazon. My last video focused on the false light, and the false light is pretty much my whole journey during the crucifixion, if you will. I call it the crucifixion, although New Age literature calls it the awakening. But this is ego death, or a dissolution of the ego, if you will. And so during that particular video, I talk about how I was activated, how my senses became really keen, and how I actually went through somewhat of a nervous breakdown as my Kundalini earthly sacral nature started to come back to me. This video focuses more on actually the name of this chapter is called Eyes Wide Shut. And so Eyes Wide Shut focuses a lot on sacral prostitution. Like I mentioned before in the introduction video for the book, I'm a sacral prostitute for the elite on the astral realm. And so the movie Eyes Wide Shut kind of gives you a lot more insight into what sacral prostitution is. Many people have heard of the Whore of Babylon. So when you think of the Whore of Babylon, think of a sacred prostitute. This is a woman who basically is I guess you would call a beta sex kitten slave. They've actually, all sacred prostitutes are mind controlled. We are mind controlled in the physical, and our sexual nature is suppressed in the physical, so we can act out that suppression on the astral as a prostitute. And so I know that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to people who may not be as well versed in spiritual principles, what have you. But I've talked about in my previous videos how there's two aspects of us. There's a physical ego, okay, like this, my ego is speaking to you, but there's an astral self. And so your astral self is the self that you go to at night when you go to sleep. So when you go to sleep at night, you shed all your concepts of the matrix. You're not a man, you're not a woman, you're not rich, you're not poor, whatever the dualistic nature of your ego, you let go of that, and you're able to act out your the restrictions, and to just pretty much do what you want to do, if you will, in the astral realm. And so because I'm so severely restricted within the physical, and much more of a saintly type of being in the physical, on the astral I'm very much I guess you would call a menacing being, like a devil. And so that's why the devil is associated with horns. Horns are, when you think of horns, or when someone says I'm horny, they say that they need sexual release. That's the person who needs sexual release. And so since my sexual earthly nature is suppressed in the physical, I do gain release of it in the astral. But the elite actually own me and own this ego that I have as a prostitute on the astral. But it's the saint, it's the I guess you would call the angel that's talking to you now. So but there's a really great discrepancy between my angel self, or my ego, and the devil that is on the astral. So it doesn't pay to be too good on the physical realm, because that means that you are you're not well balanced, if you will. So you have to have more of an ego to, you know, to gain more balance within the matrix in a way. And that's why my book focuses on the earthly, because we're taught not to focus on that aspect of ourselves, to keep us enslaved within the system. So the name of this chapter is called Eyes Wide Shut, and I bring in the byline of the title. The subtitle is focuses on the whore of Babylon. And in the movie Eyes Wide Shut, to me, the movie itself gives a whole lot of information about the occult. If you have an open third eye, if you can process and have insight into information, and looking at the movie, you will see a whole lot of clues about, you know, what this reality is about. So, you know, in the movie, you have the it couple of the time. It was Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman. And so, you know, they were a married couple in the movie, and they just represent, you know, a typical, you know, middle class or upper middle class married couple. You know, Tom Cruise, his character, Bill, he's a doctor, and Nicole Kidman's character, I can't remember her name, Alice, she is, she's a housewife. And so they start to rub shoulders with the upper echelon of society, and as they do that, their relationship starts to falter, and Satanism pretty much gets in between their relationship. You know, just to give you kind of some background about the movie, you know, when the movie first starts, we see Bill and Alice attend a party for one of Bill's patients, who is an elite. His name is Victor. And, you know, at the party, everything looks fine on the outside, like people having a good time and drinking and this type of thing. But in the background and in the back room, so to speak, there are seedy things going on. And so, you know, at one point, Bill is accosted by Victor, because Victor sends for Bill to tend to a prostitute in the bathroom, that she's OD'd off of some type of drug, some type of opiate or whatever, or opiate cocktail or whatever the case is. Her name is Mandy, and so she's a prostitute. She is a sacred prostitute. And, you know, it's funny because when Bill goes to the bathroom to treat Mandy, Victor is talking to her in a very strange way. You know, he's talking to her like a parent. And so we consider our handlers as sacred prostitutes, we consider our handlers to be false parents, because he's talking to her like a dad, although she's having sex with him and servicing him. So there's a very strange psychological split between their relationship, the relationship that Victor has with Mandy. At one point, you know, she's a prostitute, but at another point, you know, he is her handler, dad, whatever you want to call it. And so, you know, I really point that out because the elite are very sick people. You know, they have basically devolved within their divine state, with their earthly state. So they, you know, have too much money, have shopped too much, had sex too much. They've done the Kama Sutra 23,000 times, and so it's not enough for them. And so whenever you're in physicality, you always have to push the envelope to get some type of emotional gratification from the material. And because of that, they're reptilian. They're more reptilian brain centered, which means that they don't really have a whole lot of emotions. You know, these people are like vampires. They notice everything. Like, for example, if an elitist was watching this video, they would be able to study all of my mannerisms and know exactly who I am just by the whole aspect of how I'm talking and my mannerisms and all that type of stuff. So they're very much vampiric people in a way, because they don't have any life. In a way, they're just, you know, they live within a different frequency. So what does that mean? Well, you know, normal people, you know, we have jobs and we have family to take care of and that type of thing, and you know, we have a lot to do. There's a lot that goes on when it comes to leading a life, you know, trying to attain the pursuit of happiness and the American dream. But the elite have the American dream, and so whenever you're a master and you have people working for you, you can, you know, ground your desires, and you're living in a different dimension. You can smell the flowers, you know, but you smell them too much, so to speak. And so because of that, because you are in a different frequency and you're not in a place of time, they don't live in a time reality. And so, you know, you may ask yourself, well, what does that mean? Well, you know, we live in time. When we go to work, we're like, we have to be to work at this time and so forth, and we can't wait till the weekend so we can kind of, you know, have fun and that type of thing. And oh, you know, I want to plan a vacation at this time during the summer. So we live within a scheme of time, but they don't, because they have all the money in the world. So it's kind of like the days of the week don't mean anything to them. You know, it's like they don't have to go to work. So it's like, what day is it? You know, like a vacation, they don't have to plan their vacation in the summer. If they want to go to Rome, they can go to Rome today. So, you know, time is not a factor. So that's what I mean by the elite. They live within a different frequency, if you will, of time. So, but we see two different, we see duality within the same environment here. We see a party where people are dressed to the nines and having a great time, and then we see in the bathroom that Victor is cheating on his wife with a sacral prostitute, an MK Ultra mind altered slave. So so basically, you know, Eyes Wide Shut is about basically how Bill's relationship with his wife is severed when when they are rubbing shoulders with the upper echelon of society. And so Alice, when Victor is being when Bill is in the bathroom with Victor and Mandy, Alice is accosted by one of the elite at the party. And it's very interesting in this particular scene, because the man that is talking to Alice, I think his name is Sand or something, I can't remember how to pronounce his last name, but this man starts to, when he talks to Alice, he's talking to her in neuralistic programming. It's like a NLP, that's what they call it. It's a way of speaking to people that I guess primes the mind in a very subconscious way. It's kind of like seducing or seduction. And so he's talking to her in a very seductive way. And we can see physically that Alice is like taken by this man. You know, she's like, oh gosh, you know, like he's so suave or whatever the case is. But her, but you know, she still has her wits about her. She doesn't act upon her urges, if you will. Unlike her husband, who actually goes on a conquest to act out and ground his desires. But Alice, you know, she's like, you know, I need to go to my husband. I need to see my husband. But the elitist, he does something strange. He takes Alice's glass and he starts to drink from it. And so really, very subtly, you know, that's saying to her, I want to be you. Because one thing about the elitists, they live in such a different frequency of time that they know when someone is in their midst that's not them. You know, they know where life is. They're vampires. They're like, oh gosh, that's imperfection, so to speak. You know, the elitists are all about perfection. That's why when you see stars on TV, you know, they look very plastic and they have very plastic lives, and you know, they have, you know, they're perfect. You know, they have all the plastic surgery and all these different things. So when they see people who look normal, they're like, oh, I have to suck the life out of that person, so to speak. And so by drinking out of Alice's glass, he's really saying to her, you know, I want to be you, because being himself is a very a poor state of being, a poor state of mind. And so why do I say poor? Because although the elitists have a whole lot of money, they don't have love. And so when you don't have love, you are in a very poor state. You know, things just become things. You know, your lifestyle, you just adapt to your lifestyle. Just like my mom used to tell me, you know, we're creatures of habit. And so, you know, once you've eaten at all the fine restaurants and, you know, you traveled, you know, the world, you know, 50 times over or whatever the case is, nothing becomes new to you anymore. It's like, what else is out there? And so they're very poor in a sense because they have idle minds. And you know what they say, an idle mind is a devil's workshop. And they really just, you know, push the envelope because their psychological mind has actually gone completely insane. They're out of control, so to speak. So, so we see that once, you know, the party is over and, you know, Alice and her husband are separated, and, you know, I think before even Bill goes to the bathroom, he has these women, you know, pull him over to the side, and they're like, do you want to go where the rainbow ends, and trying to seduce him. And, you know, that's one thing I want to point out here too about this movie. When these women at the party try to seduce Bill, and they ask him, do you want to go where the rainbow ends? The rainbow symbolizes, the rainbow symbolizes the wheel of the zodiac. That's why, you know, birthstones are associated with the month that you were born. So whenever we incarnate as an ego into Earth reality, whenever we're born, whatever you want to call it, we are playing an avatar from the wheel of rebirth, from the rainbow. That's why the New Age calls certain kids rainbow children. So rainbow children are children of the zodiac. So you know, you incarnate, like right now my incarnation is Sagittarius. So you know, it just depends upon, you know, what spectrum of the rainbow, what ray of the sun, if you will, that you are playing. And so when they tell him, or when they ask him, you know, do you want to go beyond the rainbow, they're like, do you want to go beyond the wheel of rebirth? You know, because beyond the wheel of rebirth is you know, a state of freedom, so to speak. You know, you can do whatever you want to do and that type of thing. So that is significant. But once the party ends, we see that Alice and Bill are at odds with each other. And so this represents really Israel, you know, the Jews. And so what does that mean? Well, we look at the word Israel, the IS, the prefix IS stands for Isis, and so it's an Egyptian deity or Egyptian goddess that represents the moon. And then you have Ra, you know, Ra is the sun god, and so that represents truth, like, you know, light. So we have lightness and darkness. And then we have El, and El is the ancient Hebrew name for the Greek god Saturn. So here, this is like this is a symbol of Israel, where you have the Isis, which is the right brain, separated by Isis is separated from her husband Ra by El, which is Satanism. And so that's why Alice and Bill's relationship becomes I guess what you called it gets turned upside down, so to speak, and there's a separation that happens between them. And so, you know, at this point, Alice starts to talk to her husband about how she could have cheated on him, because, you know, she was seduced by the man at the party, and, you know, she starts to talk to him about her own, like, I guess what you would call desires and that type of thing. And, you know, she kind of lets loose and lets him know about, you know, all the feelings that she has. And, you know, he starts to gain some insecurity from that. He's like, you know, you're my wife. And so he's like, you know, he feels really bad about the fact that his wife is confiding in him about all of these desires, and how, you know, she could have cheated on him, and, you know, how you know, she has somewhat of a masculine aspect to herself as well, to where she feels like, you know, it kind of suggests that, you know, I kind of don't need you type of thing. It's like I can, you know, do what I could do what I want to do if I wanted to type of thing. And so this really does something to Bill's ego. And so he goes on a journey, if you will, to find gratification, because, you know, he has a little bit of jealousy, if you will, I would think, from his wife, and from, you know, the things that she told him about her potential infidelities, so to speak. So we see that at the party, Bill comes across a friend named Nick Nightingale. And so Nick Nightingale, you know, talks to Bill about playing at a mansion with for elitists, and he has to be blindfolded to play the piano for them at a like I don't know. Well, the thing is that, you know, Nick is not really aware of what's going on because he's blindfolded, but the whole thing is an orgy. It's like a satanic ritual abuse orgy, if you will. And so he's playing at that ceremony. And but this is very tantalizing to Bill. You know, it's very tantalizing to him because, you know, he needs sexual release, so to speak. His wife has already conjured up some jealousy within him, so he's, you know, embarking on new territory, so to speak. And so he's like, oh, okay, well, you know, I want to come to that party. And so Nick Nightingale gives him the password, and you know, he tells him he needs a costume, so he goes to purchase a costume But you know, the cost, well, and that's another thing, the costume is very significant. When he goes to purchase the costume, it's at a store called Rainbow. And so the director of this movie was very smart in, I guess you would say, signifying the importance of the rainbow. The rainbow is the zodiac, and so whenever we descend into Earth reality, we're playing in a costume. This is just a costume. This is a false personality, so to speak. And so that's why the name of the store was called Rainbow, because, you know, these are costumes, if you will, within a matrix type system. But he goes to purchase his costume, and he goes to the mansion. And when he goes to the mansion, his friend Nick is playing, of course, blindfolded. But the song that he is playing to is very significant. It's called Backwards Priest. And so, you know, at first glance, you know, when I looked at that Backwards Priest, I looked at that title, I was like, oh yeah, you know, of course, the high priest of this world, whatever you would call the high priest, the pope, or whatever, what have you, is, you know, is associated with the devil. In fact, I think the first name of the Pope, if you look at it in Roman numerals, it actually equates to 666. And so, you know, although superficially we think of the high priest to be someone who is, you know, pious and righteous, if you will, you know, he's the leader of the Israelites. Underneath, it's backwards, because the feminine principle is always twisted. And the psychological mind is always twisted by the high priest, the grand magician, Baphomet, whatever you want to call it, always twisted to accrue what we call judgment and sin. And so the high priest is justice. He's the judge, so to speak. But when you listen to the song Backwards Priest, you see that there are three voices in that song. And so you hear the voice of a woman, and then you hear the voice of a man, but then you hear the voice of a very demonic figure. And this is the voice of Satan. And so the song demonstrates how Satan separates the woman, which is the right brain, from the man, which is the left brain. There's separation, if you will. And so it causes the two principles of the mind to not go beyond the zodiac because of money, because of Satanism. So, you know, this book really talks about how the upper echelon and the elite, how they, you know, create a society that separates our left and our right minds. Even at the party, at one point, we see Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman are standing in front of the Star of Ishtar, which is related to sacred prostitution. And the Star of Ishtar is an 8-pointed star. It's the star of desire. I believe that the Star of Ishtar is connected to Venus, and so the planet Venus is the planet of consciousness of desire. Remember, the universe is within us. The universe is not without. And so this is linked to our desire. And so basically, when we see Nicole Kidman and and Tom Cruise or whatever, Bill and Alice standing in in front of the star with the star in between them, it shows that they are Israel. That Isis and Ra are separated by El. They're separated by Satan. And so, you know, this movie very much opened my eyes. It was funny because, you know, when I first saw Eyes Wide Shut, you know, I just thought it was like the sex movie. I was like, oh, this is like the orgy scenes or whatever. And so it's a movie that gives like good sex or something like that. But, you know, really, when you look at the movie from a third eye point of view, it's so much more than that. It actually gives you all the keys that you need to see how the Matrix is actually used to separate us from ourselves and make us live our lives in a very disintegrated way that breeds judgment, so to speak. You know, it's very much intriguing in that respect. So in the movie, when, you know, Bill goes to the orgy or what have you, to this big satanic ritual abuse orgy, we see that a woman there, well, actually, it's interesting to see the whole makeup of the ritual. So you have these women, I think I've counted 12 women. So there's 12 women, so there are 12 disciples, 12 feminine principles within a circle. And then you have the high priest in the middle, okay, who is the son, if you will, who is giving life to the feminine disciples, so to speak. And so these are sacred prostitutes. And so once he actually purifies them, then they choose an elitist to have sex with. And so, you know, this woman chooses Bill. And so I believe she chooses Bill because she knows Bill is not supposed to be there. One thing about sacral prostitutes, we are super duper feminine inflated. Well, what does that mean? We are, I guess what you would call, endowed with superhuman psychic abilities. And so, although, you know, Bill is masked, she still knows he's not supposed to be there. So, you know, she could see through his mask. You know, she doesn't just have sight, she has insight. And so with that insight, she, you know, she finds Bill and she's like, look, you need to get out of here because you don't know these people, or, you know, they're different. So you need to leave. And, you know, he's like, I want you to come with me, you know, I want you to be with me and what have you. And she's like, no. And so eventually they find out that Bill is not supposed to be at the ritual, and they aim to sacrifice him. They aim to kill him, actually, because, you know, to strip him naked. So basically, to be stripped naked in the Matrix means to actually dissolution of the ego. And so it's all symbolic. You know, especially for me, like, this has special significance for me because I've been reincarnated so many times that I have a whole lot of karma accrued on my computer, or the mind, or whatever you want to call it. And so a lot of it is unconscious. You know, I'm not aware of it because in the demiurge, or the matrix, whatever you want to call it, this false reality, the things that, you know, you encountered in previous incarnations are hidden from you. So say in a previous incarnation, you know, if I killed people, or whatever the case is, raped people, you know, whatever it is, something that's considered bad. And so I didn't really, and it didn't register to me that this is a false reality within that previous incarnation. And I didn't wake up in that previous incarnation. Those things are still on my psyche. And so since they're still on my psyche and I'm not aware of them, this is unconscious guilt. But once you are made naked and stripped, if you will, or crucified, those things that you don't know are made known to you. And so if you associate those things with yourself, then it's a crucifixion. And the people, the elitists, are actually, they eat you. They eat people in a way. And when I say that, not literally, but they eat people's essence, because people don't really, because people are ignorant. You know, they worship the devil, they worship the veil, they worship the unconscious. The elite, you know, they worship ignorance. And so if you're not aware that you're totally guiltless and sinless within a false reality, who would judge illusions, and you don't realize that, they can really make you believe that you are a murderer, you are a rapist, you are a sexual deviant, whatever it is in that incarnation that you were made to believe about yourself. They get an emotional quickening from this because they've devolved themselves and they can't really get off of the astral realm. It's so funny, you know, when I was doing a lot of research about ascended masters and how, you know, they're so regarded as wonderful. Ascended masters, it just means they're dead slave masters. Ascended means that they're dead, and you know, master is someone who's over a slave. But the English language was created to deceive mankind because, you know, ascended just sounds like you know, someone who has, you know, who's above the world and they're gods, if you will. And, you know, a master is like someone who's mastered something or gained some type of knowledge or some type of skill or what have you. So, you know, these words can be used interchangeably to hide the truth. And so in one way, they can say, well, we said we were ascended masters, but you thought that we were, you know, these gods that have mastered the mind, but really we're just dead slave masters. So I really definitely want to stress here how the matrix is governed by lies, and especially the language and the English language. There's a whole lot of exceptions to the English language compared to any other type of language. You know, when you think of romantic languages like, you know, French and Spanish, you know, they're pretty much governed by the same rules and principles. When you get into the linguistics of English, there's so many different exceptions and double meanings of words and things like that, that we definitely see that there is a level of confusion. You know, when I was in school and I was teaching, you know, English, you know, I really used to feel bad for my kids that, you know, that were learning English as a second language, because English is the hardest language to learn. because it doesn't really have a rhyme or reason to it. It doesn't have a pattern, so to speak, as opposed to other languages. But anywho, so, you know, but Mandy, the sacred prostitute, comes to save Bill, and she sacrifices herself. So the feminine is always sacrificed, if you will, to prevent the masculine from being stripped naked, if you will, within the physical reality. Because of if we're stripped naked and we see all of the karma that we have accrued on our minds, and the ascendant masters or the elite who control or govern this society, this existence, false reality, you know, they get to eat our essence for our suffering because we're stupid. You know, we don't realize that it's not real. And so, you know, a lot of what I'm saying is very, like, heretical. It's very, I guess that you would call sacrilegious or blasphemy. Yeah, that's what it's called, blasphemy. Like, you know, I'm sure, you know, many lifetimes I've been burned at the stake as a witch because I have psychic abilities as a feminine. I'm the feminine right brain aspect of the mind, which is Eve. And so Eve sees past the constructs of the matrix. And so the truth always has to be concealed in this reality, because this is hell, you know. This is all about judgment. It's not about anything else. And I talk about further in the book that, you know, we're made into the personalities that we are. You know, say for example, if someone is stripped naked by the ascendant masters for being a racist, and they're like, you're a racist and you need to reincarnate so you know, you can give up your racist ways or something like that. Well, that doesn't make any sense, because, you know, what if that person was grew up in a family of racists? You know, before the age of 7, a child is really open to suggestion, since they are in a theta brainwave frequency. And so they're really molding and shaping the mind during that time. So if mom and dad are racist, and you go to church and everybody at church is racist, and your teachers are racist, and you watch a lot of racist movies, and you know, say you had a bad experience with, you know, someone who's not your particular, I guess what you call ethnicity, you're going to be racist. These are different things, different constructs of the matrix, schooling, religion, whatever it is, government, whatever it is, that have shaped your false personality. And so that here we reach a higher taxonomy of knowledge, as opposed to the judgment of you're racist. And so if the soul dies in ignorance, thinking that they actually are racist, the ascendant masters get a good meal. They get a good meal off of that particular soul, because that soul has not evolved. They have not reached a certain status of knowledge, if you will. And so Mandy sacrifices herself, and, you know, after she sacrifices herself, she is you know, she's killed actually. And it said that she overdosed on drugs. And so most, you know, beta sex kitten slaves, or, you know, victims of satanic ritual abuse, they do oftentimes kill themselves because the psychological abuse is too great. You know, everything is designed within the beta sex slave, you know, to disguise the truth, or conceal the truth, and actually protect the handler. The handlers are always protected. You know, they always get up scot-free. and hence, you know, I say scot-free, and no pun intended with that, because my handler in the astral realm is King James of Scotland. And so, you know, King James of Scotland is known for writing the being responsible for compiling the King James version of the Bible. And so these handlers, they get off scot-free. And they kill the feminine principle so they can remake the matrix and remake another reality. But, you know, Mandy, she takes the fall, if you will, for her masculine counterpart at the ceremony. And so really, you know, it's very interesting, because in the book, I mean, not in the book, but in the movie, Mandy is just an aspect of Bill, we can say. She's an aspect of Bill. She's his feminine aspect. And not only that, but she's also his wife, but she's a version of his wife. And so, you know, Nicole, and I know this is very difficult for, you know, people to kind of grasp, if you will, if you don't really, if you don't have as much insight into the situation. But when we see Bill interacting with women throughout the night before he even goes to the, you know, satanic ritual abuse place or whatever, the ritual, we see that he interacts with red-headed women All of them are redheaded. And so, you know, the thing is, it makes you wonder, okay, these are just different aspects of him throughout incarnations that he has never found union with. So he's always trying to have sex with these women, but he's never able to have sex with them. And so he's not able to have sex until he unites with his wife, if you will, because at the end of the movie, Nicole Kidman says, you know, we're awake now, and since we're awake, we need to go home and fuck. And so basically that's saying that, you know, he's found union with his feminine counterpart, if you will. And so whenever we find union within the body, it's where the pineal gland, the third eye, is connected to the pituitary gland. So the left and the right are connected, if you will, and not separated by Satanism, which is L. So this is where we get Israel. So he has to go through all those other avatars before he can get to his wife, so to speak, at the end, who actually saves him and brings his avatar home. And that's why after the ritual or what have you, when Bill gets home, he's had a night of hell, if you will. The mask is on, his wife has the mask on his pillow. And so basically she was the one who brought him home. She was the one who brought him home. So we can look at Mandy as just another version of his wife that had to die so he could have union with her within another incarnation, if you will. I know it's a little bit hard to wrap your head around, but if you have insight, you'll probably be able to see it and understand it a little bit better. What else I want to talk about in Eyes Wide Shut? You know, Eyes Wide Shut, you know, deals a lot with Satanism. It deals a lot with, you know, how Satan interferes with, I guess you would call it the union between the left and the right brain principle. The color blue, the cinematography, the color blue is very interesting here. You know, there's a lot of blue. Every time Bill is talking to someone, or most times, you know, there's like a blue lighting or something that falls upon them. It's always like blue coming in from the windows, and like if you look at the doors, and I think even like the gate, if you will, of the mansion the day after, I think when Bill goes back to the mansion to kind of put pieces back together to figure out what happened, we see that even the fence is blue, and that's not typical. You know, normally fences are black or brown or something like that, but you know, blue is a very odd color, if you will, for a fence to a mansion. And so blue symbolizes Satan or Saturn, which is the pineal gland. You know, in the Bible it talks about the servants of God or the slaves of God are always sealed in their forehead. And so, in other words, this is Satan. You accept the mark of the beast, or the mark of desire, if you will. So, you know, for the most part, that's pretty much what I want to talk about with Eyes Wide Shut. You know, talk about how our world is governed by Satanism, and Satanism and money and materialism separates the the left from the right brain. You know, I also talk about how, you know, even our holidays, like, it's very sick. I remember when I found out about the whole significance of Christmas, it made me literally want to throw up. But you know, like, for example, when we think of Christmas trees, you know, during the holiday, you know, I never really wondered, like, you know, why we have Christmas trees during Christmas. You know, what's the significance of the tree? But the significance of the tree is the mind. When we think of the tree of life, and mentioned in the book of Genesis, it's talking about the mind. You know, the spine is the trunk, and you know, if you look at the indentions on the brain, like, that's the branches of a tree. So that's why they associate the mind with trees. And so the director of Eyes Wide Shut, he used lights, like, he used a lot of Christmas lights, you know, and Christmas trees. And so the lights that are decorated or adorning the trees are actually the glamour of the zodiac. So when we descend into earth reality, we're glamorized, if you will, and made into a false personality. And so basically Christmas is, I guess you would say, Christmas is celebrating the enslavement of mankind, enslavement of the mind by glamour. If you look at Jeremiah 10, chapter 10, it talks about how, you know, the Christmas tree is considered something bad. It's actually associated with a heathen. Jeremiah 10. So if you go look up Jeremiah 10, it tells you that, you know, the Christmas tree and Christmas is associated with heathens. It's associated with vanity. is associated with Satan. And you know, to finally actually realize this information, waking up as an ego and having my glamour stripped away from me really did make me ill, in more ways than one. So you know, just wanted to give you some insight about, I guess what you would call, you know, sacral prostitution, you know, and what that is. And I talk about how, you know, I was disintegrated as a kid, abused, and, you know, shown pornography and stuff like that to really rot out my sacral aspect of myself, to make me a prostitute, to make me really, you know, saintly in the earthly, but also to make me very horny and a devil in the astral. That's what we are, that's what's done to us to make us prostitutes. And just wanted to shed light on, you know, how basically there's psychological splits that are made within the mind, and separation to make that a reality, you know, if you will. People look down upon the whore of Babylon as someone who is, you know, like she wants to be a whore or whatever the case is, but the whore of Babylon is actually a slave. She is a slave. She's a slave to the elite, and they use Satanism to control her. They use money. The elitists, you know, they always control people with money. That's just what they do. That's the only way, you know. But how, you know, what can you do with someone that you can't control with money? So, you know, I was hoping to graduate and to get and escape the wheel of rebirth, if you will, in this incarnation, but that was not in the card for me from my higher self. And so, you know, it's very disheartening, but at the same time, you know, I haven't given up hope, because hopefully if I, you know, with this book and getting this information out here, my future self can actually read this information and have full disclosure to know that she's not guilty, you know, that she is, you know, that she's totally sinless, and that this whole reality is just made to make her into something that she's not, and to be made into an unholy aspect of herself. So, you know, with that, I'm going to shut down the video. I could talk about Eyes Wide Shut all day, but I do want to give, you know, something to you know, to find out in the book. Like I said, this is just a preview, if you will, of what is in the book. And I encourage you, like I said before in previous videos, to look at the video before you read the particular chapter, because, you know, it's important. It's important. Because when you read something, you're always putting your own perspective on it. And I want everyone to have their own perspective, but I also want people to have my perspective, because like they say, you know, the truth is somewhere in between. You know, there are three parts. You know, this is a trinity. There's a left, there's a right, and then there's the truth in the middle. And so this book is a biased book. I'm not going to say this book is not biased. It is biased. It is a feminine perspective of Eve, of the feminine intuitive. And so because of that, you know, my husband, or the astral self, would definitely write a different book. It would definitely be told from a different point of view. So this is my point of view. This is my truth. And so I really definitely, you know, want people to, you know, have that understanding as you are reading it. And so the next chapter, as I always try to give a preview into the next chapter in the book is called Eden. And so Eden is always associated with, you know, the Garden of Eden in the Bible, and how it's a place of paradise, if you will. And so I talk about how Eden is not necessarily what you think it is. Eden is, we're always taught that, you know, Adam and Eve had their run of the place, and they could do whatever they wanted and be in paradise and be happy, whatever the case is, and have whatever God wanted them to have. But that's not the case. In hell, that's why we say hello. In hell, we are definitely restricted in the physical, so God can have what he wants in the astral. That's why we're kept ignorant. And so that's why, for example, in America, the American dream, it talks about how we are here for the pursuit of happiness. It doesn't say you're here for happiness. It says you're here to pursue happiness. So we're here to pursue happiness and have a desire for happiness, so God can actually ground his desires in heaven, on the astral realm. And so I really get into the deep meaning of what Eden is about. So that's just a preview for you guys. Go ahead, purchase your book. And I look forward to seeing you guys in Eden, the next video. All right, bye.